Lori Spagna. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. As I explained to you in the pre-show conversation, I had your paperwork from some conference or event that I ran into you in or saw you in California at some point not too distant past, and what made me officially decide to contact you as ASAP was when I saw that the PAOweb.org, Sheldon Idol's gang, they wanted you back by popular demand, and that made me decide, okay, you're definitely worthy of getting on my show ASAP relative to some other people that don't have the popular demand thing to brag about. So that being said, please tell your life story, what caused you to experience the stuff that you do, and well, if this can enhance your popularity, by all means, what is it about you that caused you to get so much popular demand for a return appearance?
Well, awesome. Okay, well, Andrew, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and that's a really wonderful honor from PAO. I love those guys. I love Sheldon, and they're just all wonderful. I've just had a really wonderful experience with them, and I honor the journey that they've been on. So, but I will, I'll share my story and how I got here, hopefully kind of briefly. My story is this. Regular human going through human life, spent 20 years out of college in, the corporate America trap of, that paradigm of that reality, the hamster wheel life. And I was miserable, really miserable. So during those 20 years, I developed all kinds of coping mechanisms like excessive smoking, excessive drinking, excessive eating, excessive spending, and, extreme kinds of behaviors to survive in a life of misery. And what ended up happening was, after 20 years of that, I was always doing volunteer work with animals, and I had this mantra in my head that I wanted to be of service to animals on a global scale. I really didn't know what that meant, but my brother ended up dying of a drug overdose. And when he crossed over, I started to get messages from him. And at first I kind of thought I was crazy because I definitely was not really aware that I had any kind of ability to do that, to connect with the dead, to hear messages from the dead. But literally his voice would come in, I could hear him. So my first extrasensory ability was clairaudience. And he would say, "Hey, Law, it's your dead brother, Jeff." And he had like a New York accent and a real sense of humor. And that's exactly how he would have sounded. And so I started testing that and looking, to validate it and, kind of playing with it from inquiry, just wonder like what's going on here, that kind of thing, exploring. And it just kept developing. And the overall message was that he realized he was going to need some help, and he had to contact anyone he could, and I was it. And there was a divine appointment for him to wake me up. So that's where it all started. But really what happened after is where the story is, because after that, I realized, well, I don't want to die the way I am, because his message was, you're on a similar trajectory. You might not be doing drugs, but your life is going to shit and you're not treating yourself well, and you're dying a slow death. So I quit my 6-figure job. I became a dog trainer, and I was being trained by a guy who had spent 20 years working for the United States military as an animal service trainer, a master trainer. And while I was being trained by him, I had to learn to do everything on autopilot while being videotaped by him to critique me. And that's when I started hearing the dogs, and they would talk to me, and their message started coming in. You listen to me, I'll teach you. We're going to teach you. And so I started following that message. Then from there, just to breeze through the rest of the story, but that's again kind of where all the juice is. Like, I ended up leaving the domestic United States and moving to Maui. I became a dog trainer, but really what I was honing in on was animal communication, telepathy. I got my Reiki master. I started getting into the healing arts. I started getting into meditation. I found an incredible teacher who had spent his life in the Himalayan mountains studying with, master Taoists and, ancient practices of energy. And he taught me how to still my consciousness to the point, or my awareness to the point, that all of the physical reality could just drop out. So he called that a little death experience. You could call it a near death experience. And I learned how to play with that and cultivate it and do it to a certain degree, kind of at will. So the final kind of big piece of this, while I was developing all these gifts of energy and healing and breath work, meditation, animal communication, telepathy, my psychic gifts were developing. The big ultimate thing that really catapulted it all. I mean, if that wasn't enough, because that near-death experience was so transformational, it opened up everything. But one of the nights while I was meditating, I lived on a golf course in Maui, and I would meditate throughout the night on the golf course. And there was just one night at 2:00 in the morning. I mean, there was no mistaking. It was a ship. There was a ship, an ET. We would call it an ET ship. And it was, I had worked in cable industry. I knew what a satellite looked like. And at that time in Maui, there was no airports open, no plane travel at 2:00 in the morning. And this ship I made telepathic contact with. I really didn't know at that moment that I was going to be teletransported, but that's what it was. I was teletransported on ship. The experience was alter dimensional. So I call it a plasma-like state. It's not a physical body like we have physical, but it was very real. It wasn't dream. It wasn't astral travel. It was plasma state. My physicality somehow was transformed, and I was moved on ship. And at that time, I got what I would call activated. Telepathic gifts, all kinds of extra sensory abilities were basically activated. And in the years since, it took me a lot of time to sort of unpack it, but I became aware, I realized that that was what I call my star family. And so now I refer to myself as what you would call a braided starseed. And all of that is still within the matrix, from my perspective, the matrix of our reality, of our existence. So that's where all my gifts came from. From there, everything just blossomed. I started activating DNA for myself, then for animals, then for people. Everything transformed. All my extrasensory gifts came online. Super psychic, superhuman abilities. But I will say we all have them. I just got them activated and turned on in a very accelerated way. So that's kind of my story. That's how all of this started. And then I spent 2 years in Maui. After that, there's more to the story, but I ended up moving back to the mainland. And that's really when I started doing more of this stuff professionally. Before that, it was mostly animals. Make sense?
Yes, indeed. And everybody's got their own story regarding how they got their abilities. Some people get them through near-death experiences, and other people get them through things similar to what you went through. And, well, everybody's got a story to tell, and they're all interesting, and we all do have the abilities. And thank you for pointing that out. So, with that being said, all right, I guess you might as well bring up that thing that you just we were talking about earlier, about how you just said you got to be careful, like try not to mention people's names and all. But then I was like, it's funny you mentioned that when you say try not to mention people's names for like defamation and what could have resulted, because I just found out today that Jim Fetzer, I had as a guest on my show back in the day, he got sued for $450,000 for a book that he wrote that he talked about at a Philadelphia conference that I saw him live at, which was Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. It was a FEMA drill to promote gun control with some of these, like something about what the book was called, but he did the first part of the title was Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. He didn't want to just saying it was a staged event. He was flat out saying nobody died. It was staged in the ultimate staged of ways. Like, there is no victims' family members. They're all liars, including, as he asserts, the guy who just sued him for $450,000. And Well, I can kind of relate to this because not only am I kind of chomping at the bit to contact him to come on my show again to talk about this, I almost had the opportunity to do something very similar myself. There was a conference I went to in D.C. that was run by the Tea Party. I wanted to go to it to get back to my Patriot community roots, and I noticed that one of the victim's family members of Newtown was there. I was actually planning to ask him, did you know that there's a book called, that Jim Fetzer wrote, called Nobody Died at Sandy Hook? How do you explain that? And does that mean that you're not who you claim you are? That probably would have been a disaster if I said that at the conference, but I never actually got the chance to do that because, well, they kicked me out of the conference before it even started because they checked my social media and saw that I post a lot of stuff that the Tea Party doesn't post. So they maybe either thought I was an infiltrator or thought I was a bad fit. So they refunded me and told me to beat it. Wow, how
Mm,
about that? So, well,
mm.
okay, but the point is, you say you actually do know someone who claimed to know people who actually died at Sandy Hook. So if you want to tell this story, by all means, and then maybe we'll, before we get into the really nice spiritual stuff, we'll start off on this sour note. If it bleeds, it
I love
leads.
enlighten it.
Talk
All right. Well,
about
so let me
this.
say the reason I say not to mention people's names isn't because I'm not willing to mention people's names. It's because I believe, especially people who have walked the journey before me, such as Sheldon Idol, that's who I was referring to, is that it's just so important to honor their journey. And I respect and honor the people who have walked the path before me. I refer to most of those people, like in that group who's come before me, as pre-waivers, and I refer to them as scouts. And so whatever has happened to them or whatever's been going on, even if people don't understand, it's just so important to respect and honor one another's journey. So I just never want to say anything that would be misconstrued as anything other than that. That's why I say about names. That said, with the Sandy Hook piece, I'll just share my experience about that. Was that about 5 years ago, I was at a Thanksgiving dinner and I was under the assumption and sort of the intuitive awareness that it was a staged event. And I still do believe that it was designed to promote gun control. I do believe that it was a false flag, but I also have a knowing within myself. I wasn't there, so we can never know unless it's firsthand. But my personal sort of knowing is that it did really happen. And the reason is, as I said, I was at a Thanksgiving dinner about 5 years ago. I was making this statement that Sandy Hook was a false flag. And a woman directly opposite me at the dinner who was not at all confrontational, her entire face just got so red and heated. It was like within 10 seconds of me making that statement. And so I said to her, "You're having a visceral reaction, like it's very obvious. Your face is all red. You're having a response to what I just said. Why? Help me understand. Like I'm inquiring." And she said, "I was there." And she said, "I was working with the traumatized people. I was there. It happened. It did happen." And when I saw her physical response, just to me saying it was a red flag, a false flag, to me, that was real enough. And her statement of truth was real enough to know that it did physically happen. Other than that, I still think it was fabricated, like fabricated in the sense a created event. But I do think it really happened. And that's just my opinion from that perspective. But I'm a very intuitive person. I ask about things psychically. I ask so that I can help, share higher consciousness and wisdom on these things. So there was an agenda behind it as far as I'm concerned. It was a deliberate act. But it wasn't a complete falsification. Like, in other words, it wasn't a staged event that never happened, in my opinion, and from everything I've put together. And that's as much as I can say, because it's not my area of expertise, and it's not really what I'm here to talk about, other than to share insight and wisdom. My job is more, what I'm here for on planet Earth is to really extract information from the non-physical realm and to bring it into the physical realm to dramatically improve the quality of life on planet Earth by expanding consciousness, elevating awareness, and to the best of my ability, reducing whatever I can do to reduce and or eliminate suffering for all of existence. So Sandy Hook is just one little teeny bullet point topic for me. It's not really the big picture, right?
Yeah, interesting how it happened 1 week before the Mike Connor end date, but that's
Mm-hmm.
another story in and of itself. Check my interview with Jay Weidner for that. My listeners can. But anyhow, moving on to your the other stuff that you talk about, animal communication. We might as well talk about that because a lot of people, I'm sure, would love to do that, not just with their pets, but also when they go on lovely nature walks. And one has to wonder, well, does it also apply to plant and fungus communication, or protist communication? Little one-celled organisms does the
Mm-hmm.
same thing apply to those creatures, and bacteria, or even viruses? Because there's a lot of debate in science. Is a virus alive? It's one of those questions that science cannot give a definitive answer to, because
Mm-hmm.
there's some that say no, and then others say, well, yes, but the virus is just the exception to the rule. And well, that opens up a whole new can of worms when you use that phrase. But anyhow, communicating with animals. How do you do it? Any advice for those that want to learn how to do it? And does it apply to non-animals that are alive or can be debated as being alive?
Yeah, so I'll take it even further. It applies to everything. There's nothing that it doesn't apply to. So, for example, I've had conversations with Hurricane Katrina. In fact, I've had conversations with lots of nature storms, nature spirits. Everything has consciousness. Everything. There's nothing that doesn't. In fact, in one of my classes on psychic development, or maybe this was the Akashic Records class, one of my students had a relationship with a pencil. I mean, there's consciousness in everything. Is there a soul in everything? No, not necessarily. Is there a spirit in everything? Depends on what degree or what level of consciousness, level of awareness you're interacting with. So if you're interacting from the level of that's impossible, that thing is just nothing but a thing, you're certainly not able to have a conversation with it. But if your awareness or consciousness is at such a level that you understand and know that there is consciousness in everything, and that everything is an aspect of awareness, and that through awareness, everything can have conversation, dialogue, and exchange other perspectives of awareness, then yes, viruses have it, and everything else does too. So with that said, let's just make this clear. We all are telepathic. The way you practice animal communication and telepathy is the same way you can practice telepathic communication with any other living form of consciousness, or even non-living. And it's very simple. We all have the ability. So let me just say the few pieces here that every human has and every animal has. Humans are animals. We all have the ability to access a theta brainwave. A theta brainwave is a universal brainwave where information flows. It's an information superhighway. We all can do it. Most humans have never learned how. Most animals are constantly existing in a theta brainwave. We all have a pineal gland and a pituitary gland, which are master extrasensory glands in the brain that receive and exchange information and energy. For the vast amount of humans on Earth, they've been eating genetically modified foods, drinking fluoridated water, and other kinds of artificial food substances that shut down the pineal gland and pituitary glands, and that shuts down their master glands. In fact, artificial sweeteners, diet sodas, sugar, all does that. It shuts it down, which means if you're not using it, you can't really access those psychic gifts. However, they can easily be decalcified and activated, but everybody has them. Those are master glands in the center of the brain, and science knows that those glands are the glands that process sight and sound and all of the other extrasensory abilities in the center of the brain. So that's the second way animal communication and telepathy happens, and psychic intuition, etc. Also, in addition, just a couple other pieces here. Everybody has a heart, and every heart has brain matter. This is scientifically demonstrated and proven by the Institute of Heart Math. if people aren't actively using their heart beyond the unconscious way, okay, the unconscious way is your heart beats without you thinking about it. The conscious way is to start activating that heart center, actively using the magnetism that the heart center has the ability, and developing the brain matter in the heart, just as neuroscience helps you to develop your brain matter in your brain. So animals already have this. They already have their heart brain activated. They're already developed in the heart center magnetism, the ability to be ultra empathic. So we are just learning it. That's another way, but every human has the ability to do this. A couple other quick pieces here. I'll go a little faster. The gut is also, our gut has brain matter. Same way, if we go into the gut and start working with it and developing our brain matter and our ability to follow our gut instinct, that is intuitive. Animals already do it. We see them do it like more from fight or flight, but if you're with an animal and they're around someone who scares them or around someone who excites them, that's part of that. We can develop that too. We just haven't. And again, if we eat artificial foods, if we're hanging out in McDonald's, genetically modified foods, most of those fast foods now have nanotechnology, which shuts down body awareness. So the point is, if we're working with our gut in a conscious way, eating healthy foods, ingesting healthy, working with the earth, etc., we can activate the brain matter in our gut. That is another way we do ultrasensory, telepathic. That's not really brain to brain, which is telepathic, but that is another form of extrasensory communication. And then finally, we know we have our skin. Our skin is another piece of information exchanger, right? It exchanges information with the external reality and with our external experiences, including other beings. So most of us are not, most humans are putting artificial chemicals on their skin and substances through the skin. The skin eats, the skin breathes everything we put on the skin. So when we put hand lotions and creams and Vaseline that's made of petroleum oil that you put in your car, I mean, this stuff is just damaging and shuts us down. Animals don't do that typically, unless their humans are doing it to them. So that's already very active in them. So all of these are ways. There's one other thing I forgot to mention, which is we humans are mostly left-brained. So we're using our left analytical brain. All other animal species are primarily right-brained. The right brain is the awareness brain. So it knows things without having to analyze them and figure them out. It knows, the right brain knows what the left brain's trying to figure out. So animals already know all this stuff. We just have to figure it out and learn how. We also have right brains that can be activated and awakened. That's done through mostly meditation and active engagement processes. So, all right, so I'll summarize the answer to this question. Like, we've all got it. Everyone can do it. There's no one who can't learn how. The animals are already doing it. And it's up to us to decide we want to exchange and engage in those ways. Make sense?
Yes, and excuse me. You mentioned the thing about like using petroleum products on skin being harmful. I'm actually going to still using it. I am guilty of to get my money's worth anyway. Classic lip balm that's petroleum based, and it's my lips tend to get chapped more so than the average human does. I don't know if that's just a combination of naturally dry skin and talking a lot as I do, like with a show and whatnot, but I do need to apply it more, and I'm switching to coconut oil as
Yes.
soon as the
Coconut oil.
yes. Well,
Great option.
it is more expensive, of course, but can I be sure that the extra money spent on coconut oil will be well worth it? Because some guy actually told me when he saw me using the petroleum-based lip balm, he said coconut oil chapstick is the way to go. It may be more expensive, but I can assure you that over the course of using it after a little time, your skin will actually not continue to dry up as much as it did when you were continuing to use the petroleum-based lip balm over and over. Can I be sure that that will actually happen, or is it probably something else that's causing my skin on my lips to get drier than
Right. Well, you want to hear my response to that?
yeah.
All right. Number one, when you say you want to get your money's worth, it tells me that on an unconscious level, your values are mixed up, which this has been done to humans. They've made money priority over health, and they don't realize that health is more important than money. But that is part of the global collective brainwashing. Money, 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 money. And the part of our shifting has to be my health has a value. My health has a value. And my health is more important to me than money. So I'd be willing to spend more for healthy products so that I can be healthy. That's the first. It's a shift. It's an unconscious shift, because the question of does coconut oil really make a difference for the extra money? The answer is without question, yes. Healthy products extend the quality of life and eliminate the need for pharmaceutical drugs and medical intervention over time. If we haven't got that scientifically documented yet, I don't know. I just know it's true. There's no, in my life, it has been validated over and over again. I haven't needed a single pharmaceutical drug in over 12 years. I went off I was on massive amounts of pharmaceutical drugs before I moved to Maui, before I changed my career to dog training. And I went off of them almost immediately and have never needed anything since. And the same is true for my animal companion. And I know it. I have a knowing of it, even if it's not yet scientifically proven. If you make the shift, you will start to have a knowing as well, because you will have experienced it firsthand. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say about that is that the underlying causes of what we experience on a physical level, for example, chapped lips, there's always an emotional and mental underlying cause. So Western medicine hasn't recognized that yet. But Eastern medicine has known that for eons of time. And spiritual healers who are really good at their practice, they know it too. We know it. That the root cause of everything going on in the body begins on the mental and emotional plane. Well, it begins on a spiritual plane, but if you want to just look at the physical, it starts in the brain. The body has an emotional, physiological response. Just like the example I told you about Sandy Hook, with that Sandy Hook woman I spoke to at the Thanksgiving dinner. I'm saying a word, her brain is hearing it, her body was having an emotional, physiological response of extreme flush, rash, red, heating up, inflammation. That's how it happens. So your chapped lips in this example are a response to something you're thinking regarding the words that either come out of your mouth or the way you express yourself. And you're a talk show host. So the emotional response that you're having is revealing itself as chapped lips. But you can change that from within, but it means you have to address something that you're unconscious of. Does that make sense?
Yes, and well, there are. I do think I have an idea what the causes of it is. I mean, Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartz, in my session with him, what he always does first with people, the health problems he detects, because you got to solve your weakest links at your health level to live the
Yes.
best life. And he noticed I had dry skin, and he thought it was a problem with my spleen, so he suggested I fix the problem by rubbing Castile soap all over me and using that up. Now, this whole thing about
Did
using
that
the
help?
yeah, it has somewhat, not entirely, but somewhat, and
The
I'm sure that
reason it has helped somewhat is because it's an excellent solution, but it is not the root cause.
right,
The
and
root cause is your mental and emotional, your thoughts and your emotions regarding either the way you're communicating or the communication process you're doing.
right,
And how does chapped translate? sore, tired, dry, overworked. You tell me, but it's something in that range that I just said. Something sort of in that overall dynamic.
Yes, right. And the idea of like sacrificing money for health. I mean, this whole issue of Castile soap. I mean, well, he told me to switch to Castile soap, but is it really necessary to use Castile soap every day when I can save a little money by just using your average run-of-the-mill soap in the pharmacy for maybe 4 days a week and using the Castile soap the other three? Do I really need to
Well,
sacrifice
let
a
me
lot
tell
more
you
money?
how it's
Okay,
translating to me as just a
okay.
light worker, intuitive. It's translating as he's ripping himself off of living his best life. He's compromising in an area that is self-sacrificing, in the sense that he does not understand the value of his own life, of his own health. He doesn't understand or fully realize yet the value of his existence. And it's translating that way. So now when you then make an impression out into the universe of the field reads that as, this guy doesn't really care that much about his life. He cares a little, but not enough. So, okay, it's fine. He'll just keep going on like that. But when push comes to shove at some point, since he doesn't really care enough, well, that'll translate. And then it'll become some kind of, we could use the word karmic lesson, or we could use the word some higher spiritual lesson for you to start making some change where you start realizing the true, real, inherent value of your existence, and where you start demonstrating with all aspects of you, this body matters to me. So how hard does the universe have to push on us to give us our so-called lessons? Because this is all intuitive. I can already tell that's part of what you're here to learn. Your value and worth as a human embodied.
I don't deny that thinking like that it's not, maybe I don't have to really use the best product every day just in an attempt to save a little money does send a message out to the universe that you don't really care. However, is it really a bad habit or a bad mentality to approach life as a way of, for the sake of learning self-discipline, to try to condition yourself to be able to be a communist who can live off mostly your needs only? I mean, a lot of light workers would say, dude, what's the fun in that? You're missing out on telling the universe that you're worthy of having a lot more fun because you're
Well,
just
I mean,
living
it's
off.
not just that. Here, this is the thing, Andrew.
Okay.
For me, it makes no difference personally. But the way I see it, and I'm just sharing perspective, people we live in a world of free will, so you can make your own choice. But understand that there are other ramifications of choosing Vaseline or chapstick over coconut oil. For example, it also sends a message: I'm willing to continue to support the old paradigm where we basically rape and pillage our earth, and where the society is based on, I will cheapen your products so that I can enslave and indenture you to me. I'm the big corporate mug. That's an old paradigm. The new paradigm that I call the 5D paradigm is, I'm willing, for my own sovereignty and liberation, to decide that I'm going to choose everything that's healthy for the earth. The future of my existence is all about taking care of my earth. I'm going to put the value into the earth. My future existence is to small guys who are taking care, doing products that are good for us all, not just for the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. So that's another way that manifests. When we make choices like that, we're also making statements to the universe like, yeah, it's like the choice to recycle or not to recycle. Does one can make a difference? No. However, does one can reinforce in your quantum reality, and you live in your own unique paradigm in a sense, that you care about your earth and that you're going to line up with a time-space continuum, a reality where your earth is healed and restored. I mean, it's really these kinds of choices, they may seem subtle to us, but that's the whole thing. Pre-2012, we get to be freaking unconscious. We get to rape and pillage our earth, give all our power to this hierarchical reptilian it's not even reptilian. It's so far beyond that. This old paradigm, hierarchical, patriarchal domination system, and we get to be completely unconscious. And F them if it just doesn't really matter, right? In the new paradigm, we are being called to become more conscious on all levels and layers. And I'm just demonstrating some examples of how that plays out in the new paradigm. In the new paradigm, there are infinite timelines, and which ones we line up with, which means the realities that play out in our personal experiences are based on the everyday choices that we make, consciously and unconsciously. So these are just examples. They're great examples.
Yeah, I'm glad you're pointing them out to help people make sense of this and give them something to think about. Well, that's let's move down the list. I'd rather on these shows get at a lot of different subjects on the fly rather than focus on a couple different subjects at once. So let's move on to dormant DNA and the whole thing about there being 12 strands of DNA. 12 strands of DNA, including our dormant one, and how to activate it. I take a supplement from InfoWars called DNA Force Plus every single day. I only take one pill, though. I don't think I need to splurge on taking the full recommended dose when I can get from point A to point B using the a little less and save some money in the process. There I go again with trying to discipline myself not to.
I would be willing to bet, Andrew, that if I did your numerology, there would be an 8 in the life path.
You got it.
Am I right? You know your numerology?
Yes, 8 is my life path number.
I know I'm a good numerologist. Yeah, your 8 is all about value and worth and money.
Yes.
But it's really, really teaching you inherently self-value and self-worth. But anyway, okay, so go back to what you were saying, because we're not talking about numerology at the moment.
It's all right. The little thing about DNA, and well, first of all, a supplement called DNA Force, you would think, oh, this will enhance my 12 strands of DNA, but well, that's not what it advertises on the bottle. It says it's designed to improve mitochondrial health, but well, would that be a stepping stone to enhancing some of the other 12 strands of DNA? And well, that's the first question. The second part of my question is, okay, you could take a good amount of time on this show if you have to. All the other 12 strands, hypothetically, if they all get activated, what would we be able to do?
Okay, so you're asking really big questions in one sentence. So let's first start with your supplement for the DNA. They're talking about the first strands of DNA. That's all they're talking about. I don't know that product, so I can't speak as a representative of the product. What I can tell you is that when you're dealing with the physical level DNA in the first 2 strands, that's everything we've been dealing with. That basically is storing up the records of our ancestors, right? Like breast cancer runs in your family, or your family has children with blonde hair and blue eyes, or whatever. That's all the first 2 strands of DNA, right? We have fat genes in our family. We have this in our family. Okay, that's storing up the records of the ancestors. And I call those first 2 strands, for the most part, corrupted, because they're mostly indicators of what we would call blueprints that are either turned on or turned off, but most of them are predictors of sickness, illness. I mean, if you had, for example, if you had an ancestors who lived through the Great Depression, it's very likely in this lifetime you would be working through money issues or money-related issues, value and worth issues, for example, or other types of things like that. So if you had family members or lineages where women hated men or women were old hags, you might be in this lifetime working through issues of being single and alone. If you had relationship issues, that could be coded into the DNA, even though it might not be overtly listed as something like autoimmune disease or things like that. Okay, look, let me just, to get past the first 2 strands, because those we're familiar with. They're the records of our ancestors, more or less, and they're blueprints in the DNA that are either being actively read or they're passive, in fact, in that sense that they're not activated, right? Okay, Now, to get to the next 10 strands of dormant DNA, science knows that there's 10 more strands. Science has already validated that. And right now, for the most part, science doesn't know what they're good for. And it just knows that they can be activated with various forms of energy. And now they're just beginning to study that. And they just recently found 4 more codes, right? 4 more codes. So, all right, those 10 strands, those are the strands that start opening and accessing our extrasensory abilities. So, in order to get to those strands, there's like and this I don't know this part if science has validated it, but there is literally a codon in there that needs to be activated before you can really activate the other 10 strands that are dormant in the vast majority of humans. And that code, do you know what it is, Andrew, by any chance? That codon?
Uh, draw the letters. It's a 4-letter code, right?
No, it's actually a word. This
Oh,
part I don't think science has validated, but this is where I'm weaving in the spiritual part. But it's compassion. It's a
okay.
gene. So you have to be truly heart-centered, compassionate before you can get to the other 10 strands of DNA. Now, this is why, in a lot of cases, people in the old paradigm, scientists, they don't yet know what any of those other 10 strands are good for. They haven't quite figured it out yet because they're coming from their analytical brain rather than their heart center of compassion. Doesn't mean it is not talking about all scientists, we're just saying in general. So that's why light workers are the ones who are really activating this and awaken it, because the light workers of the world are the ones who have already fully activated and engaged with the compassion in their heart center. And light workers, those of us who fall into that category, whether we label ourselves as indigo family tribes, star seeds, way showers, change agents, trailblazers, it doesn't matter. We're in our heart centers. We've actively worked with that. So we've been the ones kind of going into those other 10 strands and activating them. Now, what's in them? That's the second part of your question. What happens to us? Number one, we start becoming more psychic. We start becoming more empathic. We start having a lot more extrasensory abilities. We start realizing how we are all capable of being healers to one another and to ourselves. We certainly get really good at communing with nature spirits, with, animal realm, the animal kingdom, different higher beings, angels, ascended masters, all that stuff. That's only the next 2 strands, like 3 and 4. Once you start activating beyond that, you're reaching and accessing other dimensions of reality. And these things are completely unknown to the vast majority of humans because they haven't even begun to open up the heart center of compassion. It doesn't mean that humans don't have compassion. It means that the vast majority of humans are not actively engaged in flexing and working their compassion gene and actively engaged in using the heart as a brain matter consciousness, actively navigating their reality from the heart center rather than the left analytical brain. The point is that as we do, these gifts start to activate themselves, and they you start developing them, strengthening them, just as you would in a gym strengthen a muscle. It's the same kind of concept. You start playing with it. You start realizing, yeah, you can communicate with the dead. There is such things as angels and fairies and all kinds of other things. And it depends on how far you want to go, because it is limitless. It's limitless. We're just beginning to explore. And this is what this whole new paradigm is. And it's also what, the new reality is beyond 2012. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I've heard crazier things than that. So yeah, you're making a lot of sense to me. And well, one thing that really doesn't make sense to me, that does, I guess, tie into this whole thing about humans being compassionate, is the whole idea of tribalism versus consciousness expansion. It's really interesting how in the present day you're hearing all kinds of stuff, particularly from right-wing activists like Alex Jones and also the American president Donald Trump, seem to be bashing immigrants a lot about securing the border and all that. And it's interesting though that a lot of people in the spirituality community seem to be saying, "I wish for a world without borders, where we could all get along." Oh yeah, if that were nice, then why are people like Donald Trump and Alex Jones so against it? Well, it's I. Are we supposed to be of a rainbow style minded attitude? I say that because I saw a video about are you a rainbow warrior, and it seems like all the criteria fit me to a T. And one of the ones was you really don't feel like traveling across countries' borders should be treated as a privilege where the people of a nation get to decide the criteria regarding who gets to immigrate. The idea of a wall on a border is kind of silly to you. But I mean, the argument is always, well, in the present day, that's not the way it works. Well, okay, great, but the spiritual people will say, well, how do you expect to ascend if you're going to keep using that? That's not how it works in the present day argument, when the whole goal all along is to change the way the present day is so you could be more spiritual in the future. So how do we expect to get more spiritual when we have activists and presidents who are bashing immigrants all the time?
Well, the thing is, what you kind of have to understand, I think, and I mean, those words are not my favorite choice of words because you don't have to do anything, but is that the president and these political representations of whether they're media hosts or any people in positions of leadership and supposed authority, they are just reflections. They really are reflections of the mass consciousness. So when I look at someone like President Trump, and this is for me not a political statement because my politics are for the greater good, for the highest and best of all, ideally with harm to none, or at least the highest possibility of greatest potential of good for all, with zero debt incurred by anyone, zero debt, which to me a debt is harm, karma, wrongness, pain, suffering inflicted on person or people or property or any. It's like that's pie in the sky. But my point is, I'm making it clear that my politics are not about democracy. You know, we don't even live in it. The whole Republican Democratic thing is a joke. We live in an oligarchy. So I'm not into the whole political thing. That's my point. I just want what's for the greatest good of humanity, right? That said, when I look at Donald Trump, this is clear, right? Misogynist, male, arrogant, white supremacist, someone who does not care about the earth, does not really care about nature, does not care about women, misogynist, right? And is all about the money. All right, now if we look at that just as a figurehead, forget that it's attached to that person's name. These are the issues that at this time humanity is working out. That's it. He is the representation of the issues that humanity has not resolved. And that's why that person is in office. At the same time, I will also say, from a mystical perspective, Trump is the tower that will not be toppled. Think 9/11. Trump is the wall from the old regime to the new regime, that the old regime, think Mexico, think the old landlords of the earth, drug lords, the pharmaceutical drug companies, the mafia that protects the Roman Catholic Church, that's the wall that will not be crossed from a mystical perspective into the new paradigm. I'm just giving you the mystical perspective. So I'm not pro or against, I'm just pro-humanity. But from a reflection of consciousness, this particular example and all examples, they're just what humanity is working through that is unresolved. And to me, when humanity starts to wake up and resolve their unresolved issues, that's when we can invite something new in, something better.
Yes, and I'm sure good times will be coming up. Well, the
Well,
astrology
I don't
seems to
know if
suggest
good
it.
times are coming up. What I do know is humanity's being more and more sort of forced to, lovingly forced, coerced, so to speak, to look at this stuff in the face. And it's intensifying. That I know. So this is all, we live in a free will reality, but if humans continue to use our free will in ways that are harmful and detrimental to our earth, to life, to ourselves, we won't have an earth to continue. This is what light workers of the world are doing our best, because we're the ones who work with the non-physical realm, because we understand that by working with the non-physical realm as representatives of earth, that we have the free will, we have the right to make the change, and we have the power to work from the non-physical realm to influence greater change for benevolence, for the greater good. So, I mean, that's what we do. That's what light workers do.
Yes, and you mentioned earlier, I want to get back to this. Does it have a soul? Yes. Does it have a spirit? Maybe. Well, you're obviously not in the camp of people who say that soul and spirit are two different terms for the same thing. This always
They're
leads to
not
a
the
great
same
radio
thing.
conversation. Well, some cultures say they are. So why
I
would
get it.
you assert that they're mistaken? I
People
can't help but
believe
ask.
they have a spirit and people believe they have a soul. And the fact is, they are the awareness. They're awareness. They're not a spirit. They're not a soul. They're the awareness. They are God. We are God. We are the divine, being aware of this reality that we created. And within this reality, we are playing a role of a human with a soul and a spirit that oversees us. But that is not really true. We are awareness itself. It's just we're not functioning from that level of awareness. We're not functioning or operating from that state of consciousness. We're operating from this, I'm just a human separate from God, and God is something outside of me, which is just, that's an old paradigm. Separateness. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. And
I realize it's radical. I get that the stuff that I'm bringing through is not mainstream. I mean, I get it. Like, that's, you don't go on an ascension journey to sort of play in the neutral zone, in the, in the everyday world. You go, I went on an ascension journey and it was completely transformational. So now what I bring through is stuff that's been unknown to us, right? Even though those trailblazers before me who believed we were spirits or who believed we had a soul, I honor and respect their journey, but I've gone beyond it.
yes, and the journey that you've gone on has got a lot of people to admire your work, and I'm admiring it for sure, listening to you. And well,
Oh,
I want
thank
to get
you.
you're very welcome, and I want to get back to mentioning the other group, the PAO web people. You say you love them. Well, I can't help but have a bad taste in my mouth over what happened to Sheldon Idol. The word on the street is a direct energy weapon blasted him, and I cannot help but look up at the extraterrestrials who are in contact with him, and look at those extraterrestrials and say to them, "What the hell's your problem? You let your contactee out to dry. You have the power to intervene to save people from this, and you just stood there while he got zapped by a direct energy weapon." So why would
Right.
the ETs allow for that? How could they say we have to follow some unwritten law of the universe that says we can't come to Sheldon's rescue in this regard?
Right. Well, I want to say a few things. This is also a very big, juicy, like meaty topic. So let's go into this, okay? And let's be as thorough as we can given the few minutes we have to cover it, right? First, we don't personally know the inner workings of Sheldon's agreements, his contracts, what his unique embodiment chose to go through, or how it is serving him or the greater good or those around him, including this conversation and whatever learning and growth we can extract from it. So we don't have that inner knowledge from that perspective. I mean, we could get it, we could access it, but at this moment we don't. That's the first thing. So to some degree, that's part of whatever his growth, learning, evolution is, and his journey, and how whatever good can come from it is what's meant to come from it. That we can stand to learn a lot, and we don't know. Number two, I want to say that, and this is going to push some buttons. Look, I'm a first contactee. I am an ET contactee. I believe it was absolutely benevolent. It absolutely awakened incredible gifts within me. And that's why I call myself a braided starseed, because I have full knowledge and memory and experience of my human, terrestrial, everyday life. And then I have a huge amount of access and knowledge and connection, as if it's all mine too, to my star future version of me that is braided into this reality of who I am. But that said, ETs, we are just beginning to know them. All the different star races, a lot of them have personal group debt incurs. There's what I call a debt incur. That means they get to advance potentially to the harm or detriment of the human, potentially. And they're advancing because they get to use this physical reality, the densest reality that exists is the reality we live in. And they get to grow through our experiences to their benefit, sometimes to our harm or detriment. And that, to me, incurs a debt. A debt, you could call it karma in this example. Well, that's not necessarily always what a debt is, but in this case it is. So I don't know if that's going on in that experience, but I know that does go on. And that's an example of why something like that could happen, potentially. Some of these star seed walk-ins is like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I think, oh my God, that they're misrepresenting. So they're not all benevolent, but that is part of what happens when you become a universal galactic citizenship. If we can't get along on planet Earth because we have judgments about races, how the hell are we going to get along in an intergalactic reality? So we're just learning, and it is part of the new paradigm, the fifth dimensional paradigm, that we must be developing discernment in an extremely advanced way, at an extremely accelerated pace. And perhaps that's part of how Sheldon is helping us. Because I love Sheldon. I honor his journey and his path, and I don't know all the intricacies of that, but from a bigger picture, more global, sort of higher, galactic perspective, this is what I'm sharing. We're learning. We're developing. We're starting to realize, like, are all these ETs who they say they are? Are they all representing the way they say they are? What can they do? What can't they do? What are they? What are the lines between, hey, we really are in service to the greater good of humanity, versus, yeah, we're going to help you to our benefit, and you might suffer at the consequence of it. We don't know. And that's a big, huge, brand new realm of exploration. And by the way, as far as I know, in fact, I am certain, all ETs are still in the matrix, right along with us. They're just at different dimensions of reality within the matrix. The matrix of existence is everything of the physical, and it includes lots of aspects of the non-physical world, including extraterrestrial experiences. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Does that offer some perspective to expand? Yeah.
Yes, and I've loved what Sheldon's done too. Although, well, you mentioned you were able to deduce my life path number of 8. I guess a life path number of 8 person like me would be really, really driven crazy than Sheldon has driven me and a lot of other people crazy ever for years about this whole global currency reset thing that he keeps posting in his weekly updates, and nothing of the sort has happened. And Tolak, another contactee, says, my contacts keep telling me we're going to have a 10 to 15-year period where humanity finally joins the rest of the club and doesn't and no longer holds its status as the only civilization that doesn't that uses money, as Alex Collar's been pointing out for years. And I hear him say that, I'm like, oh great, well that's nice, but how do we expect to get to that 10 to 15-year period started if we keep allowing the bankers to loan us money that doesn't exist and charge us interest on it? Be nice if we could get to the gold standard, like people like Sheldon Idol say we're gonna eventually do, as a nice kickstarting point to that 10 to 15-year period to transition to no money at all. But that doesn't seem to be anywhere in sight, and it's driving a lot of people crazy. And
Well, let me tell you a little bit about that. Can
okay,
I share?
yeah,
And again, this is my perspective. Everybody gets to use their discernment. So that started that whole first understand part of Sheldon's role as I call him a pre-waiver or a scout, was to be able to hold the vision of what potentials exist for humans. And he has done that brilliantly. So to hold the vision of potentials that exist and are very real potentials, but the bulk of humanity still must choose because we live in a free will universe. That is one of the foundational truths of our reality. So if humans haven't actively chosen it, in other words, humans chose to allow the banks to be bailed out in 2008 or 2009, humans still choose to engage with banking practices that are corrupted and self-serving. Humans choose to still engage in old paradigm practices. If that's what humans are choosing, no amount of visioning of what potential exists for us will change what humans are choosing, because humans are choosing it, and free will is in this universe. It does exist. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the birth of that new economy, so to speak, did start to blossom in the years where we were starting to see electronic blockchain currencies initially come up. Unfortunately, at that point, humans weren't ready, and the bankers intervened and blocked it again because they weren't ready either to be in on it, and they didn't want everyone else benefiting to their detriment, so they interfered with it. That is not going to go away. Blockchain currencies will resurface and they will come back. And humans will make a choice to start using them more. And that is, on a very real way, a physical opening, so to speak, to Nasara and other things that potentials that Sheldon, as an example, has been demonstrating of what's possible for us. That possibility does exist, and future possibilities for blockchain currencies and returning to the gold standard, all of that exists. The issue is that the mass brainwashing has gotten so big that they sabotaged, right? Those who have been the powers that are the global elites who control the financial system, they blocked that. And they've used the mass media brilliantly, even including fake news, as the whole idea of fake news. The only fake news is on, CNN, Chronic Negativity Network, and, mainstream media. But this is what mass brainwashing dramatically influenced the mass consciousness and their free will. And that is always on the table, even in the new paradigm. So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That's what's going on with that.
right. But you keep hearing people like James Gill and try to make the excuse, well, the reason we can't have the Nasara Jasara RV, whatever you want to call it, happen is there's the common excuse is the resistance that to this has been greater than what we expected. Dude, you've been making that excuse for several years now. I mean, is it really that
But it's
hard to
not
build up
an
a
inaccurate comment in the sense, Andrew, it's not completely inaccurate if you translate resistance to humans aren't ready, apparently. Humans still want to play with things like war. Humans still want to play with things like fighting. Humans still seem to want to play with things like hating their brother or their sister. Humans still want to play with games like judgment, and humans still want to play with games like lack. So if I make a choice like I'm in lack and I need to save a few bucks, I'm in lack, then I'm still letting an old system lead me based on lack and limitation. The new paradigm, 5D, is not a paradigm of lack and limitation. It's a paradigm of there is infinite resource and infinite abundance to me, and I am the creator of my reality, and I know how to create wealth and abundance. I have the resource of my consciousness, my awareness, my intention, my power of my frequency, energetic vibration. I've cultivated this stuff within me. I'm connected to my source. My source is my provider. Source is infinite. There is infinite possibility and potential. I am infinitely connected. I am infinitely resourceful. It is all available to me here and now in the state of gratitude and receivership. Here's the next step or action I'm going to take in a physical space to create my next level or next amount of abundance to fairly compensate whatever it is that's requiring fair compensation, i.e., that which I would like to purchase or exchange this abundance for. I'm in service and contribution to the greater good of my planet. This is all the new paradigm, but most of humans are not there yet. And if they want to keep playing in the old paradigm, they get to play with the old system until they decide something new. So the resistance to it, when James Gill, I don't know, I'm not in his brain directly, so maybe I can't interpret his words, but I can interpret it for myself. When I hear that word, resistance to it, I get it. Humans are still playing with lack, limitation, and the old paradigm. And as long as they do, that's a resistance.
well, most people who hear him say resistance to it would not interpret that as meaning the common people are postponing it by being apathetic about it. They would interpret that as meaning that they're the bad guys in the powers that be label. They're the ones who are resisting it too much, who are that to the point that are preventing it from happening. But you're
Right.
obviously they're
But
not the
but this is
whole.
what I say about that, Andrew. I mean, I love talking to you about this because you're so knowledgeable about it. Look, this is what I say. What I say is that conspiracy circles and outside authorities, that's all a trap of the matrix. So the idea that an outside authority has power over the collective and the monetary experience in this example is because those people in the collective are still giving their power to those external authorities. And they haven't made the shift. They haven't decided to claim their power from within. So they're in a trap of the matrix, external authorities having power over them.
Exactly. And however, there seems to be a few things going on that can help with the whole issue. People who follow David Icke are familiar with the Saturn Moon Matrix idea. Well, according to Brad Johnson, the Channels of Dronas, he talked about this in some videos that he did recently, as well as the conference in Orlando, Florida, that I was recently at over the 4-day extremely potent and prominent astrological weekend where we had that eclipse, the 111 energies, and then the day after that was Saturn conjunct Pluto, and then there was that
Right.
big influx of energies that came from the galactic central sun via our sun to the Earth, and caused some noticeable things on the Schumann
Yeah.
resonance chart, among other things. Well,
Yeah.
good time to hold the conference. Well, I'd like to bring up the issue of the Saturn Moon Matrix for a moment because Brad Johnson has asserted through Adronis that it's real, and George Kavaslis also, I remember him doing presentations on this, but they assert that it's actually greatly been suppressed now. The moon is not really under the control of the malevolent forces, and the Saturn broadcasting system with its crystalline ring structure has been greatly suppressed, or so Jonas asserts. And while there's a little time, yet you still have to put Humpty Dumpty back together after the damage had been caused by the bad guys for all this time. But the good news is, at least we got control of the parts of Humpty Dumpty to fix it instead of control the bad guys, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So,
It
um,
makes total sense. It's
Oh,
awesome.
well, yeah, but okay, so you hate to give dates and time periods, but you can certainly, based on probabilities, give estimations. And do you know anything about this? And what exactly has to be done over what X amount of years or whatever to finally fix the Humpty Dumpty that fell apart on the Moon and the Saturn system in order for it to not be affecting us from a matrix suppression standpoint?
Yeah. So actually, I've been talking about this for a long time myself, but in a different kind of a way. So my perspective of what I'm about to share may not completely coincide with everything that's been said. I've never studied any of this from anyone else, so I haven't heard those discussions. I'm not aware of them. What I will say about the Saturn Moon matrix is that we're coming out of a paradigm, the old paradigm prior to 2012, which was based in there was a lot of black magic and dark magic and hexes and curses and old school stuff. Plus, there were warring factors controlling this reality that we live in, this planetary system. And so they were using planets to control, dominate, and manipulate through various methods, both in a physical way and in a non-physical way, with things like what we just said, black magic, etc. Now, the black magic parts, that stuff has been cleared out by light workers, which is why you can use the words and say, well, we've regained control over that. And by also, because of the 2012 shift, this reality that we live in, this physical reality of our galaxy, is no longer under control, domination, and manipulation from those old, we can use the word, we'll just use the word warlords of the extraterrestrial realms. They're no longer allowed to exert their will over us. So what's happening is that Saturn Moon matrix is we are liberated from the black magic, curses, and hexes. The planets themselves. So you can have dialogue with a planet. It's very easy to have dialogue with an entire planet. It's a consciousness. Earth is a consciousness of her own, Mother Earth, Gaia. Saturn has a consciousness. Venus, the moon, they have their own, all of them. So they had curses and hexes on them. Those have now been cleared out from light workers who have worked with the non-physical realm for years. I would include myself as one of those who worked to clear that stuff out. And so those planets are now restoring themselves to be entirely benevolent. That's the non-physical sort of aspect of it, even though it engages with the physical, because they're planetary bodies in physical. The secondary aspect is these negative ETs who were controlling these gateways or these access realms into our galaxy, using the moon partially as a, landing spot, so to speak. Most of those malevolents who were controlling our galaxy without our conscious consent and free will, they're basically removed. They're really not able to be here unless they now understand fair energy exchange, service to the greater good, and are abiding by the rules of the new paradigm. For the most part, it's not entirely true, especially if they embodied as a walk-in, because now they're walking around on Earth with the free will choice. So that's also basically being cleared out. So when you ask me how long will it take, until enough humans are in consent and agreement that it's done. Because the human free will reigns supreme. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I don't think we need to spend too much time getting a debate of the best way to wake up the sheeple. There's a lot of and I'm sorry if I offend anybody by using the word sheeple. I just use that word because it makes a point.
But
I
you
don't
know
mean to be
what? Your
judgmental, but
show is huge for that.
exactly.
Huge. That's what alternative media is, because that's the realm of developing discernment. Because to someone listening to us right now, they might think, I'm crazy, we're crazy. To someone else, they're like, oh, that fills in that puzzle piece. Oh, now I get it. And other people are like, I just want to learn more. I don't know what the heck they're talking about. But that's how we expand consciousness. That's how it's happening, through alternative media like this show.
Exactly. And I mentioned the maybe you can confirm or hopefully you know something about this. Some videos have come out, some many like metaphysical based YouTube channels like Higher Self and The Truth Can Change Your Life and whatnot have made a couple videos asserting that on that big 4 day astrologically significant weekend of the eclipse, the 111 energy, the Saturn conjunct Pluto, and then the energies coming from the leading into that Monday, the energies that there was a big meditation going on around the world of a lot of people at that weekend. I was not able to participate in it live because I was sleeping, but I did send out the intention that as I'm sleeping, should send out my energies like I'm meditating. So I'm sure I played a part in this, saying that I was just in the wrong time zone for it to be done live. That's so assuming. And well, the word on the street is that meditation did actually cause the tipping point to suppress negative energy to the point where it's well, people have been saying this for years, but this is a noticeable no turning back marking point is probably the best way I can put it, where we're moving towards the light, and this meditation did cause that. Do you know anything about this?
Well, I don't know about that particular meditation. There's meditations all the time going on. And the meditations are dramatically improving the quality of life on Earth. And they are a demonstration of what humans are choosing. Humans are choosing peace in mass quantity. So when we do those mass meditations, they have a significant influence on how we are experiencing our reality. So, for example, if we weren't doing all those meditations, we might have already had World War III, or we might have had all kinds of mass calamities that we avoided. So those meditations matter, and they're huge, they're significant, and they're a demonstration to the quantum field that humans are choosing peace. And they are very important. And whether they happen in a group together, or whether they in the physical, or whether they happen through the internet where people from anywhere on the globe are just participating, or whether they happen even on your own on a daily basis, 10, 15 minutes a day, or little moments throughout the day. Like I set an intention alarm sometimes, and I just stop and breathe and intend, and, intend for peace, intend for harmony, intend for the greater good of humanity. All those things make a difference. See, the new paradigm's not meant to be hard work or signing petitions or fighting or picketing. Not that those aren't ways to make change. My point is that the power is within every one of us to make the change. And most of the time, the ways we make those changes is so easy. It's like, stop, sit still, breathe, tell the quantum field what you intend to have, like command it in a respectful way. I command for more organics. I command for more healthy living products. I command for more all natural foods, whatever. Just in a very neutral way like that. And then just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, universe. Because there is intelligence and there are universal laws, and they're all responding to us. And so when we start using our higher consciousness to realize that this is how we're going to be making the change, and we are actively participating in it, we're using our free will to make that change. So those mass meditations, they're huge, really important. And effective. Yes, extremely effective.
Exactly. A lot of studies about people like Greg Brayton and David Wilcock have talked about this in great detail about it suppressing.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
And of course they spike on the different scales where they measure that. Like the Schumann's resonance will spike on days of peak global meditations, and so you can see how that's affecting the energetics of the earth. You can scientifically measure it, for example, with Schumann's resonance. So, yeah.
Right. And let's switch gears for a moment. I want to talk a little bit about like cycles and what we're going into and what, because you mentioned Mayan calendar end date came up a couple times, 2012 in this interview. Well, a lot of people would say that's not just an end point; it's also should be thought of as a fresh starting point. But when it comes to like what is a good starting point, I mean, it seems like they're being thrown all over the place for different reasons. Among other things, you got, I mean, the universal year of 2017 that was a universal year one, so at a universal level, and so that at a global scale would be thought of as a fresh start, even though it's 5 years after the 2012 fresh start, and we actually, in just a matter of days, have another fresh start of sorts. The year of the metal rat is actually a fresh start in Chinese astrology because rat is the first sign of the zodiac. So this throws a lot of questions. Okay, how are people deducing what meets the criteria from a cycles of time and a global consciousness standpoint? What should be thought of as the most appropriate fresh starts, and why does this year of the rat fresh start for humanity? How is it any different? Well, it is different because we're in a different numerological year than we were in the fresh start 1 year of 2017. I hope you know what I'm trying to get here, but this
Mm-hmm.
could cause a lot of confusion among people saying, okay, I'll live my life as though it's a fresh start this coming Friday when we have the official time of the new moon, which is the official time of the year of the rat because it's a lunar calendar in Chinese astrology. But like, weren't you supposed to do that fresh start back in 2017 and 2012 for the reasons I just gave?
Yeah, so let me say a couple things. First of all, I want to address the topic of fresh starts. And second, I want to address the Chinese calendar, which I'm asking my guidance, which one's first, which one to go first. Okay, so we're going to address the Chinese calendar first. And just understand the Chinese calendar is based on linear time. And linear time was built in the old paradigm based on 24-hour cycles. And, over time, we measured time differently. I mean, if you go back to the Greek times and Alexander the Great, and then the Gregorian calendar, and changed it again, and it just changed, right? Time in the old paradigm it really is an illusion, and it's a man-made concept. And the measurement of time, while it is basically tracked to planetary movement, sun, moon, stars, it still is just a man-made measurement tool. And the calendar system of Chinese astrology was born out of that old paradigm based on linear time. So we are now in a new paradigm. Everyone's trying to figure out what's going on in the new paradigm. The new paradigm is not based on linear time. It might not seem like linear time has changed to some people, and if it doesn't, that's because they're still operating in the old paradigm, the third dimensional paradigm. It's overlapping, right? But in reality, those of us who are already functioning in 5D with a new consciousness in a new paradigm, we understand that linear time is no longer functioning the same way. And we understand that the whole concept of the Chinese astrology is pretty much winding down, not the same effectiveness. Now, if you were to say this to somebody who was a Chinese astrologist, of course, they would have a huge amount of resistance because they're still in belief systems, aka free will choices, that it's real and valid. And so it would be for them because they have a free will ability to buy into it, to believe it, to continue playing with it. However, in the new paradigm, it's really not true in the same way. That said, I get it. If we have collectives believing in it, it has validity. To the degree that collectives believe in it, there's validity to it. And so it is creating a new start and a new beginning and a new sense of energy. So I'm not discrediting it. I'm just offering additional insight in terms of old paradigm time, new paradigm time. New paradigm time, we have to unplug ourselves from that old matrix of linear time and more work in a conscious way with the fluidity of time versus no time, non-time. And even from a galactic perspective, our planet has moved into a new space in the galaxy. The galaxy is shifting and changing. The planetary influences are changing. We're discovering new planets. They all have gravitational influence on our planet. All of the dynamics of time are changing. Okay, but that's not the real question, because the real question was about new beginnings. But so far, does that make sense?
Yes, although before we get to new beginnings, the idea that you should forget about, well, not forget, but look at different ways of, I presume if it's true with Chinese astrology, it would have to be true with all other astrologies. But well, wait a minute, you're not actually suggesting that Chinese astrology is any more or less valuable than Western tropical or sidereal astrology? Because I tried to get a little bit of everything for the sake of variety in my life. Occasionally listening to my every day I read my Aries daily horoscope, but I also check out my Tiger horoscope. There is no specific fire tiger horoscope. I am specifically a fire tiger. It's just Tiger and Aries on astrologyanswers.com. That's my site of choice. And
Yeah.
and also
Well,
a
let me say
Pisces.
that. Okay, so we'll come back to the new beginnings part,
Yeah,
because
I'm not
that's
going to
still
forget
relevant.
it.
But what I'm saying about astrology is that, and we didn't talk about astrology. We just talked about the Chinese calendar,
Which is
which is a
astrology,
measurement
is it
of
not?
time. It's based on, okay, that's true, but it's a measurement of time. So that's how I was addressing
Yeah,
it.
but it's
So
lunar
to
and
address,
solar. Lunar, in a different to the Western, it's got lunar qualities too. So one would see
yes,
that and say it's got to be better than Western, because you're getting more key stuff involved, and therefore neglecting, not neglecting things that shouldn't be neglected. So,
well,
right,
but I was addressing it from a place of an aspect of tracking linear time. That's all I was saying.
okay,
If we get into the aspect that's astrological, whether it's sidereal, whether Western, Vedic, it's the point to understand about astrology, all forms of astrology, is that they too were all born out of an old paradigm. And it does not make them invalid, just like the Chinese calendar is not invalid. These were all tools that we developed as a civilization to help us navigate an old paradigm. They still have effectiveness, but they are limited to a large degree. Now we're in a new paradigm that is entirely new to us. There are very few people who know how to navigate this new paradigm. We're all putting pieces together. We all have different contributions to make. But that said, nothing from the old paradigm is absolute in the new paradigm. In fact, everything from the old paradigm has less and less value and validity in the new paradigm. So astrology, and I never had to learn astrology in this lifetime, more or less. I've been an astrologer for lifetimes. I lived as a monk studying the stars. Like, I have memory of many of my lifetimes. So I love astrology. I got a little addicted to it for a while. It's easy to get addicted to it. It all is credible and valuable. However, once again, I'll say there's new planets in our galaxy. There's new planets influencing us. Vedic astrology doesn't even take into account some of the newer planets, some of the big planets that Western astrology does. So now we have new planets, new gravitational pulls, new influencing factors. We don't know anymore how we're being influenced. And by the way we're being influenced by astrology is always still a reflection of our consciousness. It is not a predictor nearly as much as it is a reflection. So we, as a collective, let's just look at the four planets right now. We don't have time for a whole astrology lesson, but what's going on in the house of Capricorn? You got Sun, Moon, Pluto, Saturn, all conjunct, which means they're all side by side, and a south node. And Jupiter just moved in there. I mean, this is why there's so much crap going on. Why did that happen? It's not because the planet started migrating in that way. It's because all of humans for the last 10 years have been focusing on the system and the structures represented by Capricorn, the money and the hard work and the expansion. And so everything built up to this crescendo where you could see it coming in the astrology. It became a reflection of our consciousness. But we don't understand that really. We think in linear terms and we think, oh, but the planets have been progressing that way for, however long they've been progressing. That's because the mind is still functioning from linear. Once you step into nonlinear thinking, you understand that every now moment presents something new. In every now moment, this moment presents something new. And the mind will perceive that it might have always been there, but it's just right now showing up, showing up, showing up.
Well, okay, sorry to interrupt you, but I guess that ties in with what we were about to talk about regarding fresh starts. It's just showing up. So you're really just confusing yourself, or I was confusing myself, trying to make sense of which is the best fresh start, 2012, 2017, or the year of the rat. So
right. So let me say about fresh starts.
Okay.
It is true that every moment is a fresh start. It really is. And all of these fresh starts are opportunities because, again, it's a reflection. You have to understand the external reality is a reflection of the consciousness of the humans and consciousness existing here in our reality. So we project that onto the stage in the external reality. So everyone's on fresh starts and new beginnings. So the universe is just presenting opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to start new and fresh. They're all new opportunities to start fresh. The real question, in my opinion anyway, and again, use your discernment, take it or leave it, is that you get to reflect on yourself and your own journey. And you get to decide, who have I become? What am I becoming? And who do I want to become from here? And that's really the question. Because we're looking at the world stage like the whole of humanity is all going to change together, when in reality, the whole of humanity is changing like waves in an ocean. And the waves and the patterns of the waves and the movement of the water don't really know where one wave begins and one wave ends. You just suddenly realize the tide has changed and now you're going in a new direction. And that's it.
Right, and these opportunities all present themselves, and whenever something unfortunate happens to you, well, this is my suggestion for people. Perhaps you could help me determine if this is the best way to go about it. I mean, if something unfortunate or disturbing or unpleasant happens to me, my first reaction is, well, don't obsess about it. Don't even try to worry about the metaphysical reasons as to what you brought that in, what caused that from a law of attraction standpoint. That's irrelevant. What I should be doing right now is asking the universe to help me resolve the maximum amount of karma that I can resolve as a result of this unfortunate thing happen to me. If I can maximize the karma resolution from this unpleasant thing happen to me to resolve my bad karma, is that you suggesting that's a bad way of going?
Well, when you ask to resolve the maximum amount of karma from something, you're giving yourself a lot of challenge.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's a big leap, right? No, what I would say when something so-called bad, life is our teacher. No question. Life is our teacher. Experiences that we perceive as bad, I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying they're our teachers. So we get the opportunity to learn, grow, and evolve. And so when those things happen, we get to say, okay, how am I going to respond to this? What am I meant to receive in terms of learning, growth, and evolution? And yes, what am I meant to resolve? What are you meant to? If you start asking for the maximum, maybe that's way more than you're meant to. Why? You don't have to put yourself through challenges and struggles and maximum karma resolution. It's so extreme. This is why we have extreme situations. No. I mean, maybe you have just a simple thing, like you have some karmic thing come up, and what you're really meant to learn is just to forgive and let love be. And if that's it, then you don't need to do the maximum. People are so extreme. The only time I use the word maximum is when I say, let's have the maximum benefits. Then I like maximum. What's the maximum benefits? For the greater good of all. Well, I'll go for that. What's the maximum benevolence? Okay, that's good. But you want to resolve the maximum karma when that's not even necessarily in the contract or required? I think that's, I don't think people realize what they're asking for when they ask
Okay,
that.
well,
I would call that a miscreation.
all right, but just to make it a little more understandable where I got this idea, a lot of it was actually caused after I did a little exercise of sorts using, I think, was some sort of Chinese grid exercise of sorts, where part of the exercise involved seeing how many letter O's, number zeros are on the bottom of the graph after you do all the things the exercise asks you to do to determine your like your destiny or your fate or whatever it was that the exercise was determining. And you could get anywhere from 0 to 3 zeros. I had 2 zeros, and the more zeros you have, the more karma you have to resolve in this lifetime. So the
Who
exercise
said
goes.
this? Where'd you get this from?
Oh my God, this was a while back. But my point is, assuming this is true, is that there must be a fixed amount of karma that one would have to resolve, if this exercise is correct, because if you were to have a higher zero, well, then your fixed karma would be greater than it was if you had fewer zeros.
On.
So that's where I
Somebody
get the
made
idea
a
to
chart. Or I don't
maximize
know what
karma.
that is, but just intuitively when I'm hearing about that, it's
Okay.
like someone made a chart and that was their perspective of truth and they shared it as if it was the perspective. And it was simply a perspective and not absolute. Here's how you know when you have karma going on in your reality. When you have karma, something karmic, basically what's happening is your buttons are being pushed or something is emotionally or mentally causing you some form of distress and upset, which ordinarily probably would not be necessarily upsetting to somebody else who was not going through that karma. And your job when you're going through karma is to find the resolution. The word is resolution. So the resolution is always some form of consciousness, gift, some form of awareness, some form of expansion of consciousness or awareness, elevation of awareness, or somehow where you feel complete with it, done and complete, resolved. Sometimes that means forgiveness. Sometimes it might mean some kind of acceptance. Certainly it does mean receiving gifts of awareness that you weren't aware of before, so that it can be resolved. So if you can see that stuff and realize that that stuff is designed to be your teacher, you're being triggered to activate the desire to resolve something, then you can open up, like, to receive those gifts. What are the gifts I'm meant to receive? What am I meant to learn and resolve here? What expansion of consciousness am I meant to expand and awaken to, or elevate into, or align with? And when you start asking that, like in a really open-hearted inquiry, you're just asking the universe, you're asking your own higher self. Those answers are provided. So then when you resolve it, that's when what happens is you start having suddenly an aha, you realize something. Oh, I get it. But because some person puts some chart out there, which may or may not be true, certainly maybe it was true to their perspective, maybe it was part of their journey of learning, but doesn't necessarily mean it's true for you. Maybe it is. And if it is, it's going to be triggering. It's going to be emotionally jarring. It's going to be somehow upsetting, because that's what karma is. It's somehow upsetting, triggering, or jarring, and typically not to anyone else but you or the other people involved. Does that make sense?
Yes, I will certainly look into your suggestion next time some unfortunate thing happens to me, knock on wood. And yes, so that was good advice. I do believe the thing though was Chinese based, and the Chinese, they have a lot of graph and grid exercise where you put numbers and grids together to
Yeah.
determine things, and I even use that to as one of my monthly horoscopes, the Chinese grid of sorts where earth, fire, water, houses, and all that, and if it's
I get that.
yeah,
But
so.
I just want to say about that. I mean, I love that stuff too. It's just that it tends to be more of a distraction than anything else because your journey, your frequency, your energy, your bandwidth, your vibration, the vibratory state of your being, your energetic being, that is going to lead you exactly where you're meant to go. You're going to come up entangled with whatever you're meant to resolve. And some little chart really isn't, I mean, it just, it's not really the determinant. It's more of a distraction. We've been living the old paradigm is really based on living in the playland, living in Disney World. You can play with anything. You can go on any ride. You want to be on the roller coaster, you want to go in the haunted house. That's what the old paradigm is. And nobody thought they were in an amusement park. It's an amusement park. So you want to play with numbers, you want to learn numerology. I mean, I've done all that stuff. I love it. Fun. But the new paradigm is about conscious creation, liberation, unity with source and all that is, oneness with source and your own individual self, your own fullness, richness, wholeness of who you are. And it's about all new creation based on conscious awareness and deliberate manifestation for the greater good of all with harm to none. That's it.
Oh yeah, it doesn't have to be made really, really complicated, but everybody's going to have a different set of tools, and I don't want to use the word crutches because that's such a derogatory term, it seems, but a better set of tools to help you enhance the infinite
Yeah.
potential.
I mean, I love those tools. I love numerology. I love astrology. I've done it for years. I do nameology. You can give me almost any person's name. I know the names.
Right.
I love all that. And there's no wrongness with any of it. It's just that it is not the determining factor anymore. Those are tools and they can be really helpful. And there's no wrongness to them. It's
Okay.
just important, on the topic area of karma. That's all.
Right.
It's all good.
But when you're trying to determine like the appropriateness of one tool versus another, and whether you can even use the word silly to determine some of the ways people can go about trying to use to expand their consciousness and fix their weakest links. Okay, let me give you a couple examples that I've recently fought with, and I'm sure other people have similar stories to tell about, like being a tiger in the Chinese astrology system. My opposite, most non-compatible one would be the monkey. It's probably why my father and I didn't really get along as well as we could have when growing up, because he's a monkey and I'm a tiger. That's a broad reason, but the point is though, let's say I want to try to fix this or deal with this or treat this problem that I have with nature, where my sign doesn't get along with the monkey sign. Let's say I buy a stuffed animal of a monkey off Amazon and keep it somewhere in my house to teach me how to learn to like it. One would think, okay, wouldn't that not help you help your sign and myself in general cope with all the other things in the universe that are like the monkey that don't resonate with me, or even getting a tattoo of a tiger. I was actually thinking about that yesterday. Maybe I should get a I've never actually had a tattoo in my life that's a true tattoo with body art. But I'm thinking, I actually had a vision of getting a tiger tattoo, and I'm thinking, well, that's one I can't possibly regret because I'll be that sign for life. But if is it really a bad way? Dare I use that phrase, bad way of trying to expand my consciousness and become one with the universe because I'm going to an extreme or a silly way of doing
Yeah,
it?
Andrew, there's no bad. Here's the
I
only.
figured you were going to say that. There's no bad
Yeah,
way, but
you're playing with that stuff. You're a creator. You get to have whatever experience you want. This is the only I would use. I mean, bad is like one of those judgment words, right? Good or bad. But the only thing that's really we are not meant to do anymore that will trap us in the matrix is to create debt. Now, when I say the word debt, what I mean is a harm incurred on the part of another to benefit at the expense of another. That creates a debt, will be translated into karmic if it's not resolved. So you want to get a tattoo? You want to play with tigers? You want to read your astrology? Use it as a tool. It helps you. If it helps you, have at it. No one's being hurt. Have a good time. Play. Have fun. That's part of this paradigm. That's part of the old paradigm and the new paradigm. Play, have fun, enjoy, celebrate. Now, the new paradigm is just asking us to become really super conscious and discerning and decide and choose. Because what do you want in your new reality and what do you want to let go of? That's mostly what it's saying. What are you ready to let go of and release? And that's in the astrology too, by the way, with the South Node in Capricorn. What do you want to let go of and what do you want to hold on to and create more of? And what kind of structure do you want to put into that? So there's no wrongness in any of that. But the only wrongness in our reality is when a debt is incurred. And a debt means that some or many are benefiting at the expense of a few or one. That is a debt incurred, and that creates karma, and that will definitely yield entanglement in the matrix. Further debt. That's the only so-called wrongness as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yes, and that does get back to another thing that Sheldon Idol has said often that drives a lot of people crazy. We'll be returning to common law. Do no harm, there is no crime. Yeah, would that be really nice if that happened a lot sooner? Because the way the court system worked, the thing about Jim Fetzer I mentioned at the beginning of the show is just the tip of the iceberg. And what excuse could humanity have to not want to get out of this system of you know what? Let me change the subject because it's not
Well, because
that
you want
pleasant.
to know when you're like trapped in a spider's web and you're struggling to get out, and the glue of the web just furthers entangles you, and you're struggling, and you start thinking like, "Oh, hum, I'm not going to get out. This is just the way it is. I'm stuck." That's the game of the matrix. And the only way to get out of that game, in a sense, in this example, is to stop and breathe and then sort of get conscious about what solutions there might be for you in that moment. So, maybe you start asking for solutions. Maybe if I relax and breathe, this web will get looser. Maybe if I use just solutions start coming. Oh, maybe I can use my saliva to disentangle myself gently. Oh, maybe a hummingbird will come by and, you know, just cut me free. That's the kind of thing we're in now. It's like you're in a net, you're entangled, and every time you struggle, play with it, engage in it, it's just going to trap you more. But when you start looking for solutions from outside of the net or from within, which is really where they come from, suddenly you start to break free. And then before you know it, you suddenly are able to help others break free too, because you've gotten completely liberated and found your way out. So that's what I'm saying, really. And that's just an example, right? Because it's just the easiest way is to speak in a simplistic term like that.
Right, and one group of people, we've got about 10 minutes left before I want to call it a show. Go past 2 hours, lousy attention span start kicking in. So that's the problem with humanity that drives me crazy, the lousy attention span. But anyhow, we could spend all day on this topic, but if I ask you to do on the fly, your extraterrestrial contacts, where do they come from? What dimension and density are we talking from? And do they have any specific messages that you want to get out on the show for what humanity is potentially in store for and what they got to do to get things right faster and smoother?
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a huge question. So my star family races are of an intergalactic group, multiple species. I would say my strongest connection is Palladian in origin, but I definitely feel a strong connection to many other galactic races. We all have the ability to awaken this within us because our galactic connections are coded into the dormant DNA beyond the first, at least beyond the first four strands. Typically, we start to awaken this when we get into the fifth strand of DNA, typically, because that's fifth dimensional consciousness. You have to be in 5D to really start awakening that in your DNA. So we all have connection to star family races. It's like blueprints in the DNA just waiting to be read, which is, in other words, activated. So that's the first thing I want to say. I feel very strongly connected to almost all of the different star family tribes of benevolence. I feel it's all, for me, it's a benevolent intentions, always leading with the greater good of all, the highest potential of positive experience for all with zero debt incurred. That is my walking mantra in a sense. And I feel like that was given to me through my my family, my spiritual journey through my connections. But what would I say that overall they're saying is that it's time for us to wake up. The slower we are, the more intense it will get. In a sense, when I say the slower we are, the more resistance to change we have, the more intense it gets to sort of get us to wake up, so that we get sort of kind of lovingly coerced. That's when you get to sort of look at yourself and be like, how is my life going? Like, what's going on here? What's going right? What's not going so great? And there's where we get to make the change. That change is from within, doesn't come from the top or the bottom, comes from within. And I get that that's part of what they're here for. And they recognize that humanity is at a choice point. That's nothing new. And that the heat is it's going to heat up. The intensification is heating up to make people become more and more conscious about our choices, our actions, our energy, our frequency, our vibration. And not to mention our own choices that we make both consciously and unconsciously. Because we are the creators of our future. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that was very good advice, and well, your advice, your ET contactees' advice. Well, if they wouldn't dare call you a plagiarist because they're giving you this information to get out to people. And oh, that's another a thing that kind of makes me want.
I want to say one. Can I say one other thing about the ET thing? I don't know why you even mentioned plagiarists, but I don't know if other people say that. I just know I'm not.
Well, okay. There's another reason I brought that up, but what do you want to say, and then I'll.
Because I don't. I mean, this is just what I get from my connection, right? That's my role here. But what I will say is, and I mean, I'm in the media, and other people are in the media. We're all teaching and helping and sharing one another. But so I don't know what that's about. But what I will say is that I do know that our ETs have been involved in our reality since before 2012 in terms of the benevolent ones helping us to awaken. And many of them have absolutely tried to work with our world governments, who basically really resist them unless it's for self-service. So the benevolent ones will not allow their gifts to be used for self-service to the benefit of the few at the harm of the many. So now they use people like me and other intuitives, star seeds, and light workers who they can connect with to be of service in a way so that those so-called rules are upheld to the benefit of the whole with harm to none, in the best way possible, but certainly Zero debt incurred now or at any point in the future. And if a person who's channeling an ET or working with ETs can't say that is their credo, if they can't, they might not have ever heard that, but if they can't absolutely say that that's their credo, then that is an enslavement experience. That is a debt experience. And in that case, I wouldn't be involved with those ETs or those channels or whoever they are.
Right.
If it's self-serving, then it's still not of the purest intention for the well-being of all and the future of humanity.
Right, but when I mentioned that thing about plagiarizing and all that, kind of leads me to wonder what it's like on these higher level consciousness worlds. I'm thinking that in these worlds, there's the idea of actually filing a copyright infringement against someone or suing them for plagiarism would be non-existent because everyone's of a collective consciousness and things are shared on a level where that kind of thing doesn't happen. And one more thing on that, the idea of justice being glorified revenge. That's what George Kavaslis once said. I view justice as glorified revenge. And on the other hand, you got people saying justice, you should always find it. You got to draw a hard line. And I mean, this guy Eddie Craig from Roll Law Radio, who has a guest on my show, he very unique script on how to handle transportation stops and police encounters. It's designed in a unique way, so even if the officer totally goes over the edge and makes a false arrest on you, you have everything that you need at your disposal from a record and a video standpoint to sue the guy. And Eddie Craig is pushing the idea of filing a lawsuit against the cops to get them to stop tyrannizing you. Well, okay, but George Glass would say suing them is glorified revenge. Well, okay, but how can you let the enemy trample all over you? It's a tough line to draw, and so how do you make sense of that? And how do the ETs, I should say, handle that? And also plagiarism and copyright, is that non-existent on their worlds because it's all collective?
Well, I'm not on all the different ET worlds, so here's what I can answer intuitively and from all of my knowing is that in the higher dimensional realms, that kind of petty ridiculousness doesn't exist. It's just petty games, and it doesn't really exist. And when you're going through it, it's because there's a karmic debt incurred. Someone has done a wrongness, someone has incurred a wrongness or a debt, and the debt, i.e. the karmic issue that is unresolved, must be resolved. Now, I teach people how to do that. I work with people, but I get it. We're at the end of our call. What I can say is that if people want to learn more, that's what I do. I help people in coaching and healing groups, and I do DNA activations to help people activate their dormant DNA. I do something called the Lightworker Boot Camp, which is basically spiritual coaching for people who really want to resolve these kinds of issues: physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, energetic, for them, for their ancestors, and for their animal companions. I can work with children under the age of 17 through the adult, who is the parent. So I've worked with babies in the womb, family ancestors who have crossed on. All that stuff, that's how I help people. That stuff is resolvable. And yeah, I do it in my Lightworker Boot Camp. I do it through online webinars and workshops. And I have a crystal journey where we go to Arkansas and we do all kinds of spiritual processing and working with the crystals and activating our light bodies and learning how to communicate telepathically with the crystals and with other beings. And this stuff is so much fun, and we reconnect with our family tribes. We make connections with starships while we're there. We swim in crystal waters. I mean, this is the kind of stuff I do. So I can't necessarily, I just think a lot of that stuff really is. It's so old paradigm. It's like petty stuff. And if that's what people want to be involved with, they're just perpetuating kind of the end of their reality, because that paradigm is coming to an end. And the way to resolve those kinds of things, that's what I'm here to talk about, is how to resolve them. And that's the work that I do. That's how I help people and animals. And by the way, I'll just say, since, if it's okay.
No problem.
Yeah.
We'll close and give your website too, and any future conferences, please.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So yeah, I'm first of all, if people are in the Los Angeles area during the month of February, I'll be at the Los Angeles Conscious Life Expo in February, the first weekend of February at the LAX Hilton, and I'll be doing this work. Like I have, I'm on a panel, I'm on 3 lectures and workshops there, and a post event where we're doing activating the DNA. They'll learn about this and experience it in a very safe and easy, fun environment. That's a great place to learn. Of course, they can go to my website, lorispagna.com. It's LORISPAGNA.com. Under the live events tab, my events are always posted. And they can do DNA activations. They can do that online or in person at the expo in February. I do them online, and I do, of course, that kind of stuff at the Lightworker Boot Camp and at my Starseed Crystal experience and during my online webinars and training events. There's also some memberships there on the website at lorispagna.com where people can learn more about DNA activations and sacred membership. Finally, I'd love to give some people some free gifts if they'd like. So, for example, if you're a starseed or you resonate with the ET experience and you want to know more about your starseed origins, you can go to lorispagna.com/free gifts/starseed. And you can get some wonderful gifts on starseed, knowing who you are, what they are, what the indigo family races are, how to know if you are one, etc. You can also go to lorispagna.com/free gifts/DNA, and you can get a free DNA activation. You can experience it for yourself, and you can learn how to activate DNA and why it's so important when you go there and you get that free gift, those free gifts. And then if you're an animal lover, you can go to lorispagna.com/free gifts/animals, and you can get amazing, wonderful free gifts on learning animal communication and telepathy and energy healing for you and for your animals. All of that, you'll find it at lorispagna.com. That's my website.
I believe I actually downloaded all those free gifts at some point recently, and so many things I do in life that cause me to forget them. I'll make sure I get right on them.
They're good gifts. They're
Yeah,
really,
sure they are.
They're not like just a little PDF that sort of like tells you something. You're like, why did I download this for nothing? You know, my gifts are really good gifts. There's like whole classes in there and
yeah,
just really great stuff that, you know, you have to pay attention to it, but it's really rich content in there. That's super.
There's a couple of things that I remember seeing those on my list to download, and I remember thinking, when did I download this? Now I know it was your free gifts. So I'll get right on that. And by the way, sorry, I mispronounced your last name. It's Spagna, rhymes with the Russian name Tanya, right? The G is not, there's no strong G sound, right?
Yeah, well, you could say if you said it in the American way, it would be Spagna.
Oh.
I just say Spagna because that's the way I was raised saying it. It's the Italian way.
Okay.
It's all good.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
So I'll have this uploaded YouTube by midnight tomorrow. I tell them, I guess, hopefully sooner. So best of luck to you.
Oh, did we stop recording? I didn't get to say thank you. My final thank you.
No, I didn't even stop recording at all.
All right. Well, can I just say, I want to just say thank you.
Sure.
Thank you to you and to everyone who listens, and thank you for participating. And thank you for everything you're doing with your show, because it is expanding consciousness and helping people to become more discerning. And thank you to the people who are the light workers out there and the way showers and the change agents who really are doing the work in the non-physical to make this world to make it a better place, because that potential does exist for us. So I'm just grateful. That's all. I just want to say thanks.
And I'm grateful I had you as a guest. Thank you very much. And best of luck to you. I'm sure I'll run into you at some future conference.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.